Wasn't much to look at: faded silver paint, a dented bumper from a grocery store fender bend, and a stubborn cassette player that refused to give up a tape ID jammed in it years ago. But it was mine, and it carried me through college, dead-end jobs, and more late-night drives than I could count. Then one Friday night, everything changed. I'd stopped at a diner just off the highway after work. The place had that greasy all-night flickering neon sign, smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease. I parked in the lot, slid into a booth, and ordered pancakes to take the edge off a long day. When I came back out, my car was gone. At first, I thought I'd forgotten where I parked. I jogged up and down the rows, panic building in my chest, but no, it was gone. Stolen. Police came. Took a report and told me not to get my hopes up. Cars like mine, they said, either got stripped for parts or dumped in a river. Weeks turned into months. Nothing turned up. Insurance gave me a payout, enough for another used car, but driving it never felt right. My Civic had been more than a car, it had been part of me. Eventually, I forced myself to move on. Or I thought I did. 2 years later, on an ordinary Tuesday, I was heading home from work. The sun was sinking, painting the street in dull orange light. As I turned onto my block, I noticed something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. Parked across the street from my apartment building was a car I knew too well, a silver Honda Civic. My Honda Civic. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over so hard I nearly hit the curb. My heart was hammering as I climbed out, staring at the car. Same dent on the fender, same peeling bumper sticker from a long-forgotten band tour. It wasn't just similar, it was mine. I crossed the street in a daze. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. It opened with a click. Unlocked. Inside, the smell hit me, first a mix of stale fast food wrappers and the faint pine scent of an air freshener. Long gone, the steering wheel still had the worn leather cover I'd bought years ago. The cassette tape, still stuck in the player, sat exactly as I'd left it. It was like Edie stepped back in time. But then I saw it. On the passenger seat was a Polaroid photo. I picked it up with trembling fingers, my breath catching in my throat. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my bed. The angle of the photo was unmistakable, taken from inside my apartment. The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. I stumbled out of the car, dropping the photo on the asphalt, and ran into my building. I locked the door, closed the curtains, checked every closet. No one was inside. Still, I barely slept that night. The next morning, I ran outside, determined to call the police. But the Civic was gone. No trace it had ever been there. I told myself it had to be some sick prank. Maybe someone had bought the car at auction, tracked me down, and decided to mess with me. But the photo there was no explanation for that. Days passed, then weeks. I convinced myself it was over. But then the headlights started appearing. At first, I thought it was coincidence, just another car driving behind me late at night. But the more it happened, the more I noticed. Always the same dull yellow glow, always trailing just far enough behind that I couldn't make out the driver's face. Sometimes, I'd pull over just to check. The headlights would slow, pause, and then vanish. No car passed me. No engine noise, just gone. Once, I caught a glimpse of the shape behind the lights, a silver Honda Civic. My Civic. Sleep became impossible. I kept imagining the photos on the passenger seat, the way it showed me from inside my locked apartment. I started double-locking my doors, checking my windows, leaving lights on all night. But no matter what I did, the car kept showing up, parked at the end of my street. Across from the diner I sometimes still visited, reflected in my rearview mirror on empty highways. It never came too close, just waited, watching. One night, I worked late and didn't leave the office until after midnight. The parking garage was nearly empty. As I walked to my new car, I froze. Across the garage, in the shadows, sat my old Civic. its headlights flicked on. I didn't wait to see who or what was behind the wheel. I ran, fumbling my keys, diving into my car. The Civic's engine roared to life, echoing through the concrete. I peeled out of the garage, tires squealing, heart hammering against my ribs. Into Mirror, its headlights followed. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, I've kept my curtains drawn and slept on the couch with a baseball bat beside me. But sometimes, through the blinds, I catch the faintest glow of headlights waiting at the far end of the street. Always the same dull glow. Always the same distance. I know it's only a matter of time before it gets closer. Before it parks right outside my window. Before whoever or whatever is behind the wheel decides to finish what they started. Sometimes, I wonder if that Polaroid wasn't just a warning. Maybe it was a promise. Because one night, I'll wake up to headlights shining through my bedroom window. And this time, I won't be sleeping in the photo. I'll be the one inside the car. My sedan was gone when I left my apartment one morning. Frustrated, I assumed it had been towed. After hours of calls, I tracked it down to a tow yard across town. When I arrived, the clerk gave me a strange look. "We don't have that car," he said. I insisted, showed him my van. He disappeared into the back office. Minutes later, he returned, visibly shaken. "Follow me." We walked through rows of wrecked cars. At the far end, beneath a torn tarp, sat my vehicle, crumpled and destroyed, as if pulled from a horrific accident. But I'd driven it the night before. The clerk whispered, "We impounded this after a fatal crash last month. The driver never made it." I stared at the smashed windshield, heart racing. The driver's seat was still stained with dried blood, and on the passenger floor was my backpack, the one I'd left on my kitchen chair that morning. This is one of my favorite poems. The poem is called "The 2-Yard." Pause the video here if you want to make a guess. From an anthologist, the first 3 seconds of this video are very engaging. What do you think about these 3 seconds? I'll show you in a bit what makes them so powerful. But first, let's have a look at the poem itself. A little while ago in a far-off place, there were 2 friends. They played together every day, but they did not like each other. You might say, how can you be friends if you don't like each other? Well, that's how it is sometimes. One was a tall, handsome fellow with flaxen hair, and the other was small and fat and very ugly. The fat little one always said he was going to be an actor. And the thin one laughed at him and said, "You would have to be an actor indeed to play the part of an animal, for you are the most unattractive creature I know." The small man took offense at this and challenged the tall man to a fight. "I'm not afraid of you," he cried, "and I'll beat you up." "Oh, no doubt," said the tall man, "but when I've licked you, I shall lick you well." Soon afterwards, they fought. They tore at each other with such violence that the spectators could not tell who was beating whom. One day the fat man came upon a new idea. He said to the tall man, "Look, why don't we settle this once and for all? We can ask the emperor to give us each a yard of land, and then we can fight it out." The tall man thought this was a splendid idea, and they went to the emperor together. "Your Majesty," said the fat man, "we want to buy a yard of land from you. We intend to fight on it with all our strength, and only one of us will be left alive." The emperor thought this was a very reasonable request, and he gave them each a yard of land. Then they thanked him and went away. When they had prepared their yards, the time came for the fight. At the beginning, the tall man struck the short man and knocked him down. He beat him up for a bit, but the short man quickly got up and retaliated. He hit the tall man so hard that he fell down and never got up again. After the fight, the short man stood panting over his opponent and said, "Well, it's just as well I won, or else you would have beaten me up." Then he, too, fell down dead. Sewing Tien yards were useless, and both the men were dead. So what made those first 3 seconds so powerful? First, the title. The title is short, punchy, and mysterious. It creates intrigue and invites the reader to explore the story behind it. The use of lowercase letters also adds to its informality and sets the tone for the rest of the poem. Second, the opening line, from an anthology, creates a sense of place and timelessness. It tells the reader that this is a story that has been passed down through the ages, and invites them to immerse themselves in the world of the poem. Finally, the use of archaic language and sentence structure creates a unique atmosphere and tone for the poem. The language used is simple but effective, creating a sense of authenticity and immediacy that draws the reader into the story. It was close to midnight when I left the cabin, a 2-hour trip home, nothing but backcountry roads, the kind that curve endlessly through black trees and farmland that seems abandoned even during the day. By that point, I was tired, the kind of tired where your eyes sting and the lines on the pavement blur together. I rolled down the window, letting in the cold air, hoping it would keep me awake. The road was empty. No cars ahead, no headlights behind, just me, my own engine, and the endless stretch of dark asphalt. The GPS sat glowing on the dash, but at some point, the little arrow froze. I tapped the screen, restarted it, even unplugged and plugged it back in. Nothing. Just stuck on a blank section of road, as if the system didn't recognize where I was anymore. I told myself it didn't matter. I knew the way well enough. I'd driven this route dozens of times. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence pressing in on all sides was heavier than usual. Half an hour later, the low fuel light flickered on. My chest tightened. Out here, gas stations were few and far between. Primetta slowed down, coasting the hills to save what little I had. Finally, like a small miracle, I saw it. A glowing sign ahead, a gas station, squatting at the side of the road, buzzing with tired neon. It looked old, but it was open. I pulled in, the gravel crunching under my tires. The lot was empty except for a rusted pickup parked at the far end. Inside the little shop, a single overhead bulb glowed, and a man leaned behind the counter with a newspaper. I filled up quickly, grateful, then went inside to use the restroom and grab a coffee. The clerk nodded at me, but didn't say much. The kind of man who looked like he'd been standing behind that counter his whole life. But when I came back outside, my car was gone. For a long moment, I just stood there, keys in my handbag slung over my shoulder, staring at the empty space where I'd parked. The lot was silent, stretching out into the trees. My first thought was that I'd parked wrong, maybe on the other side of the pumps. But I checked, walked up and down the lot. Nothing. It was impossible. I hadn't been inside more than 5 minutes. He went back in, asked the clerk if he'd seen anyone pull in. He looked at me strangely, then shook his head. "You were the only one out there," he said flatly. We both went outside, scanning the gravel lot. My car was simply gone. Stranded and shaken, I borrowed the clerk's phone to call for a ride. He slid it across the counter like he'd done it 100 times before. No questions. No reaction. I was still on the line when I pushed the door back open and stepped outside. And froze. My car was there, parked exactly where I'd left it. Engine running, headlights spilling across the empty road. The clerk stayed inside, watching me through the glass. Slowly, cautiously. I approached. My heart was hammering, but relief bubbled up in me too. Maybe I had parked somewhere else after all. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. But when I opened the door and slid inside, I knew something was wrong. The seats were ice cold. Not the kind of chill you get from a winter night, but the deep, biting cold of something that hadn't been touched in years. I put the key into the ignition out of habit. The engine didn't respond, it was already running. The wheel didn't move under my hands. The car pulled out of the lot on its own. I yanked at the steering wheel, stomped on the brake, even tried to cut the engine, but none of it mattered. The car drove itself. My hands weren't in control. The headlights cut through unfamiliar trees. The road was no road I recognized. Narrow, cracked pavement swallowed by overgrown branches. The further we went, the less it felt like a road at all, just 2 strips of asphalt winding deeper into black woods. My phone wouldn't work. No service. The dashboard clock spun wildly, the numbers blurring as they flipped too fast to read. That was when I glanced at the rearview mirror, and I saw myself, sitting in the back seat, grinning. It wasn't just a reflection. It wasn't me at all. The figure leaned forward, eyes catching in the headlights, my own face staring back at me, but stretched, wrong, smiling in a way I never had. I tried to twist around, but the seatbelt locked me in place. The figure didn't move, just watched, grin widening. The car picked up speed, the trees on either side closing in. I shouted, begged, prayed, but the road kept pulling us deeper. My head felt light, like the air had thinned, and then nothing. I don't remember what happened after that. Not clearly. It's like my memory was cut, like a film reel skipping frames. The next thing I knew, I was lying in my own bed. My clothes still smelled of cold air and gasoline. My body ached as if I'd been driving for days. When I stumbled outside that morning, my car was parked neatly in the driveway. Mud splattered the tires. The odometer showed an extra 300 miles, and when I checked the back seat, I swore I felt the faint warmth of someone still sitting there. Since that night, I've avoided that stretch of road. I tell myself it was just exhaustion. Driving home from a weekend trip, I pulled off exit 17 to grab gas. It was close to midnight, and the highway had been nothing but long stretches of trees and silence. My tank was running low, so when I saw the faded sign for a gas station, I didn't hesitate. The place looked wrong. The canopy lights above the pumps flickered weakly, casting a sickly yellow glow. Weeds split through cracks in the pavement. The station itself was dark, windows boarded in places, a closed sign hanging crooked on the glass door. Still, I parked beside the pumps, figuring I could at least stretch my legs. My bladder was screaming, so I wandered around back, hoping to find a restroom. The building smelled of mildew, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the buzz of insects. When I came back to the lot, my car was gone. At first, I thought I was looking in the wrong spot. I spun in circles, scanning the cracked asphalt, but the lot was nearly empty. Just a rusted old pickup sitting near the edge, and an old man leaning against it. He was tall, but hunched, his face weathered and sagging like sun-baked leather. His watery eyes followed me as I stood there, frozen. Finally, he spoke. "They took it, didn't they?" His voice was hoarse, as if the words scraped his throat on the way out. I blinked at him. "What are you talking about?" "My carrot was right here." The man shook his head slowly. "That exit don't let cars leave." My stomach dropped. What the hell does that mean? But he didn't answer, just looked past me, toward the dark highway beyond the station. I pulled up my phone and dialed 911. My voice was shaking as I explained that my car had been stolen. Within half an hour, 2 officers arrived. Their cruiser lights strobed, red and blue against the boarded windows, washing the cracked lot in color. Relief flooded me finally. Someone would help. But when they asked for my license and registration, the night twisted again. The younger officer frowned at the documents. "Sir, these are expired." "That's impossible," I snapped. "I renewed them last year." He shook his head, showing me the screen on his tablet. My driver's license number, my plates, they all came back as invalid. Worse, the record showed that my car had already been reported stolen. In 1996, I stared at him, unable to breathe. "That doesn't make sense. I bought that car in 2018. I have the paperwork, check again." But the system didn't budge. To the police, I was a ghost. My car had vanished from their records long before I'd ever touched the keys. The older officer glanced toward the pickup where the old man still stood watching. His face tightened, like he knew something but wouldn't say. Then he handed me back my worthless papers. "Best thing you can do, sir," he muttered, "is get back on the highway. Don't stop till you're past the county line." That night I checked into a motel and barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of driving. My missing car carried me down an endless black highway. The world outside the windshield was pitch dark, and the fuel gauge never moved. The radio played nothing but static. And worst of all, whenever I glanced in the rearview mirror, the reflection wasn't me. It was someone older, someone hollow-eyed, with a face stretched thin by years I hadn't lived yet. His mouth moved, whispering things I couldn't hear over the static. I woke, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. Weeks have passed since then, and sometimes when the roads are quiet and the sky turns black, I see headlights in my mirror. They keep their distance, but I know it's my car, and I know that one night, when the road is empty and the radio hisses, I'll look in the mirror again, and this time the man behind the wheel won't just be staring, he'll be smiling. I worked nights at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town, 12-hour shifts, concrete floors, and a constant buzz of conveyor belts. By the time I clocked out, my body felt hollow, running on caffeine and muscle memory. Most nights, the parking lot was my favorite part of the job, stepping into the crisp 3 a.m. air, away from the noise and the fluorescent lights, staring at the floodlit rows of cars. Mine was always easy to spot. Row B, space 14, right under the tall lamp that flickered but never went out. But that night, my car wasn't there. I froze halfway across the lot. My keys were in my hand, my bag slung over my shoulder, but the space was empty. Just a dark oil stain marking where my car should have been. Ikano, primera, ADN. T parked anywhere else. I'd been in the same spot for years. At first, I thought maybe I was losing it. Over time, messes with your head too many nights. Not enough sleep. I checked the row, walked up and down the aisle. Nothing. Just an ocean of other cars, all silent and still, their windshields reflecting the orange glow of the lamps. Finally, I trudged back inside and called the security office. The night guard, Frank, was a thick-set guy who'd worked there forever. He didn't say much, but when I told him my car was missing, he just raised his eyebrows. "You sure you didn't park on the far side?" "No," I said. "Roby, same as always." He sighed, pulled up the CCTV feeds. The monitors hummed to life, flickering with grainy black and white footage of the lot. He rewound the tape, fast-forwarding through the night. And there was my car, right where I left it. At 10 p.m. still there. At 11 still there. At midnight still there. Then, pen. On the screen, one frame showed my car sitting in its spot. The next frame, it was gone. No one approached it. No one drove it away. It didn't pull out of the space. It didn't get towed. It just wasn't there anymore. I leaned closer to the monitor. Wait. What the hell? Rewind that. He did. Same result. 1 second there. Next. Seco gone. Frank's face had drained of all color. His usual bored expression was replaced by something I'd never seen on him before: fear. "This?" he muttered, licking his lips. "This isn't the first time." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, not the first time?" He shook his head, already reaching to shut down the footage. "Look, you should just file a police report. Maybe it was stolen before the cameras caught it." "That's impossible," I said. "You just saw it vanish." But it wouldn't look me in the eye. Wouldn't answer. I left the office furious and unsettled. Called the police. They shrugged it off, took my statement, wrote down the details, promised to check pawn shops and chop shops. No one ever found a trace of it. I had to take an Uber home that night. Sitting in the back seat, staring out the window at the dark streets, I couldn't stop picturing that empty space in the lot. It felt less like a theft and more like something had swallowed my car whole. Weeks went by. Insurance sent me a check, and I started saving for another vehicle. But I couldn't let it go. I kept replaying that footage in my head frame by frame, the way reality glitched, like something was cut out of existence. Then, one evening, as I walked back from the corner store near my apartment, I froze. 2 blocks away, parked at the curb, was my car. The Same Meg, the same color, same dent in the fender, even the same cracked bumper sticker peeling off the back. My heart hammered in my chest. I dropped my grocery bag and ran. As I got closer, my breath caught. It was my license plate. My car. But when I opened the door, The inside wasn't mine. There were child seats in the back, old photographs taped to the dashboard, a rosary swinging from the mirror, the smell of air freshener I'd never used. It was my car, but lived in by strangers. I backed out, shaking, convinced I was losing my mind. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement in a nearby window. A man stood there, staring down at me. He looked just like me. Same build, same hair, same jacket I was wearing that night. His expression was blank, but his eyes followed me with unnerving precision. I slammed the door and ran. By the time I came back with the police, the car was gone. Now, every time I walk home, I catch myself glancing at the side streets. Sometimes I see it parked in the distance, headlights off, waiting, and I can't shake the thought. If I ever open that car again, I'll find him behind the wheel, and maybe this time, he won't let me leave.